So thanks. I think Erin started with some philosophical considerations, and then Dimitri continued with very specific things. So I will now go back to the origin and be, I would say, really kind of somewhat philosophical, I would call it. You will say later on. I mean, just to the history. So when I started at the ETH, I really started with as a one-man show with 4 different microscopes. Actually, none of those microscopes are anymore available in the facility. No, sorry, one is available, but basically it's almost only the microscope body which is still there. Virtually everything has been exchanged in between. And today in 21, I am part or leading partially Scope M, and I am responsible for the light microscopy and histology part and so on. But we are part of a much bigger facility, and currently we have more than 20 high-end microscopes and over 10 people in my group or under my leadership. And in the meantime, indeed, the technology what we host consists of histology, screening, standard light microscopy, and under standard I understand not only confocal but also super resolution and so on and so on. And in this past 70 years, we had 3 lab moves with construction of new lab spaces. We changed the operational model from a non-paid model to a paid model. We have grown. We have received new areas and underwent reorganization and so on. So I think it's very little in the history of, or in the life cycle of a core facility what we haven't experienced over these past years. Now, I tried to summarize a couple of take-home messages for the audience here, and would go through them. So I think I really believe that core facilities are really essential for top-level science today. On the other hand, I think this is for me the basis of all discussions. On the other hand, it's also clear that or my other take-home message is that although if you are about to build up a facility, you don't think that it's easy, but believe me, for me it was much easier to build up a facility than to keep it running over a longer period of time, because in many cases when you try to build up a facility, there is fresh money, there is a lot of motivation around and so on. So at the beginning things move in a way much more smoothly, or some things are much easier to arrange. It's a considerably bigger challenge, at least for me, to keep the facility running over a longer period of time. And the other thing is what I always mention to my people, and for me this is the main thing about a core facility, that's the main purpose of a core facility is really to serve the users and enable science, and not necessarily to realize your own ideas, but I am all the time keeping in my head that we want to help people to do their science. The other important lesson is that at least in my story, the most difficult problems were never of scientific nature. So those are not the scientific problems, rather personal ones or financial ones, but it was never really science what was difficult to solve. And I think all of probably you who worked or work currently in a core facility, you would agree that one of the most important things what you need when you are working in a core facility, you need to love people, you need to love to work with people, otherwise the whole thing will not work. And like Erin also mentioned, that flexibility and creativity, if you work in a core facility, is key. And of course, the less money you have for your core facility, the more creativity you need. And I think Dimitri gave you a very nice example how with creativity you can kind of correct the missing money, or correct for the missing money and so on. And the other thing, what is still important, that if you work in a core facility, forget your proudness and whatever, you will be many times offended, you will be hurt and whatsoever. So if you are a sensible person, I don't think that you will have a long, or you will have a happy life or happy career in a core facility. Now, when I was thinking about really what advices I could, general advices I could give about founding a facility is partially what Erin and also the others also mentioned, that you should really learn from others. So you should visit as many places as possible. And the other key issue is that you need to have some people who are pushing the facility. This can be bottom up or top down. So you need to have some key PIs who will help and who will push the whole thing. Otherwise, you will be never successful. And this is not to underestimate, because there will be always resistance and things like that. You need to have allies. You need to have key PIs who will help you to realize your aims and so on. The other thing is, which is, I don't think it's a contradiction to what Erin is or was saying, but my lesson is that do not try to work out all the details at the beginning, because then you will just spend long hours of thinking about details, and then when you come to those details, you will realize that those are not questions at all. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a vision, but don't concentrate all the smallest details at the beginning, because then you will just get crazy and you waste your time. And I think the other issue is that you should really think, or at least I believe that the core facility is kind of like a small non-profit company in a university, and you should really think about starting it also as a small company. So you should see yourself, if you are a core facility manager, like a small company manager, and you should act like a small business manager or a CEO of a small company, and then it will be somewhat more easier to cope with the challenges and understand the processes. Now, in terms of instrumentation, because I was going through a couple of questions what you asked in the before this course, so I try to answer some of those questions. So here I would a little bit contradict to what Dimitri was saying, that he was saying that don't try to get those eierlig and the Volkmilchsau, so these multi-purpose systems. Very honestly, I prefer multi-purpose systems, but how we are doing it, we are having kind of bread and butter instruments, and if possible, of course, you shouldn't make too big compromises, but it's very good to have niche technologies also on these systems. I'm just telling you one example. We have, for example, a laser microdissection microscope in our facility, because for laser microdissection you need anyway a fully motorized, relatively high-end wide field microscope. We are using the same wide field microscope also for normal fluorescent live cell imaging and things like that. And like that, it was not a big investment to prepare the microscope also for fluorescence, but very honestly, the laser microdissection, it takes only 10% of our microscopy time, and the rest of the time we can use it really as a high-end fluorescent microscope, and like that we can really optimize the usage of our system. It's also a long discussion whether you should have non-commercial systems in your facility or not. Again, it depends very much on your possibilities, but our lesson was that you should be very careful with non-commercial systems, because on the long term, it can be very difficult to support them unless you were the one who built them. But we had some examples where a postdoc developed some technique, and there was the idea of having that technique in the facility, and then the postdoc left, and then no one knew anymore how to fix the instrument and so on. So you should really be careful with non-commercial system. And I mean, the last thing is how to develop or how to get new technologies. I think you should just follow all the technical developments, and what is as important, you should continuously discuss and you should know the needs of your customers, of your users. Actually, I am quite often saying you should know better what your customers needs than themselves. So I'm really attending, or try to attend, the different progress reports of the various groups at the institute, and be in a way active in thinking about their experiments, because and this was quite fruitful in many cases, because I was able to come up with ideas which they were not even thinking of. The question, how you maintain the instruments, and of course this is a serious issue. So the first thing is that of course it depends very much on the instrumentation, but I would say that the general rule for myself, that you should really trust yourself to do certain repairs, and when you hire stuff, this should be also one thing, that ideally you should hire staff, if possible, who is ready to learn this. I mean, they shouldn't know it at the beginning, but they should be ready to do this. It's like I'm thinking about like a Paris-Dakar rally driver. I mean, of course, they have a big service team, but certain things even the driver need to fix it. And you can be a successful rally driver only if you are ready to fix some issues on your cars, because it can take quite a while until the service team is there, and so on. Of course, then there is this thing, service contracts or not. Again, I mean, we could spend days on these discussions. I think it's quite clear that these are very nice to have, but very expensive. So you should always think whether you can afford them or not. One thing what you should really consider, that the service contract price should be really seriously considered when you make a purchase decision. So in our last confocal microscope purchase, this played really a role, and it was one of the main arguments why we went for one vendor and not for another one, because their yearly full service contract was actually 3 times cheaper than someone else's. So there can be considerable differences there. And of course, if you have a larger facility, I mean, you have some advantages, because if you have larger instrument pools with some appropriate budget, then you can somehow buffer the costs, like for laser repair and other stuff. But again, I mean, this depends very much on the facility side. It's always a big thing when you design a facility, what type of room you should have, and so on. It's of course you should think about climatization. You should think about humidity. I think also access is a very important, stability of the power, and so on. And then I think one lesson what I learned, that whenever possible, look for simple solutions, and try not to overdo this whole thing. So I have seen in some cases where people were spending over a year to get, for example, HEPA filters in a room, which the equipment, what they at the end put there in the room, it didn't require any HEPA filtering or any air filtering. And again, of course, there are luxury solutions for climatizations, but you can get very good results also with much more simple solutions. Try not to overcomplicate your life. Of course, you should get the specs what are needed for the equipment, but try not always to make your life more complicated. Finances, of course, this is a very difficult thing. So again, I can't tell too much about that because this is a very political or strategic decision which is dependent on your country, institute, and so on. I have seen virtually everything. So I have seen places where there are charges, where there are no charges, or smaller charges, whatever. I think the general lesson, what everyone can confirm, that no charge, if you have absolutely no charge on the microscopes, on the usage of the institute or instruments, it can result in not used or not efficiently used booking or reservation. On the other hand, it's also clear that the charge should not be as high that it would really block science. I mean, if there are experiments which people cannot do because of missing money or charging problems, I mean, then something is wrong. And the last thing is that I think for a core facility, it's very good and very important to have a certain amount of independence, to have a certain own budget. It's possible. So I have worked also under conditions where when we didn't have a budget, so it's possible to work also without an own budget, but it makes your life more complicated. Now, how much this own budget is, I mean, that can be discussed for ages. Again, you can live without an own budget, but if you have a certain freedom or some own budget, it makes your life much easier. Some people asked about IT issues, so whether or not central storage or image database and things like that. So again, I am somewhat pragmatic, and because I come from a very complicated and very complex institute, I would say that we, for example, we don't have central storage, or at least not a long-term storage for all data. Partially because we cannot deal with all the responsibility. We simply haven't the resources to deal with all the responsibility which comes with the data storage and so on and so on. But what we certainly worked out that we help the users to realize established workflows for data storage and data processing. And again, when I have seen some models where people tried or implemented a central storage or even more professionally a central image database. I can tell you that wherever this was working, it was working only because the leadership of that institute had a very strong political and strategic will, and they were forcing it through. Otherwise, I never seen a very successful implementation, because there will be always some people who do not like these centralized storages, and if you don't have a very strict institute-wide policy, it's very difficult to push it through. And here some issues about the users, or some advices. Again, for me, the customer is the king. So whatever, and we really take this seriously. If they ask us to do stupid things or whatever, of course we try to educate them. But if, again, here look at the red sentences. My philosophy is that as long they are not destroying our instrument, I allow them to do whatever they want. It happened that they were doing things or trying to publish things which I knew that they were scientifically wrong. I clearly communicated that I think this is wrong. I also said that please do not include me on the author list. Still, they decided to publish it, and a couple of years later, they needed to retract it. But again, I think it's not that's my personal philosophy. It's not the role of a core facility or core facility manager to educate people or educate PIs how to do good science and how to properly publish. Of course, you need to keep a certain level of discipline, but again, I don't think that we are policemen or we are the guardians of science or something like that, because again, customer is the king, so the people should be satisfied, and it's for at least at the ETH. Of course, we look at statistics, how many publications are coming from the facility and so on, but actually the final and the only key measure about our success is whether the users are satisfied or not. And as long as they are satisfied, everything is fine. Once they are not, then it's bad. And then there was also a question that how should you hire staff? So here again, my policy is that I when hiring staff, and I was in the lucky situation that for most people with whom I am working today, I was hiring them personally, not all of them, but certainly my philosophy is that I rather concentrate on the soft skills and the intelligence and creativity and patience, and not primarily on the actual scientific education. I need to say that here I very often disagree with my boss, who is rather the person who just has a list that for example, like Erin mentioned, an electron microscopy expert should know the techniques of negative staining, STEM, or whatsoever. And if one thing is missing in the list, then he says, no, this person is not good because he doesn't fulfill all the requirements. And I said that I think these things can be learned, and an intelligent person can learn them in a relatively short time. Soft skills are much more important than these very strict issues. And of course, the soft skills are there. And again, sorry, there is a mistake. So what I meant that people should be, to a certain extent, resistant to boredom, to human stupidity, to bad remarks and things like that. And of course, this requires quite a portion of self-confidence, but it shouldn't be mixed with arrogance. And last but not least, so how to make your staff and yourself happy? I think here the important thing is that people should have somehow, as long as possible, varying tasks. So one should have both boring tasks and interesting tasks. I think generally, as a manager, I am always trying to give to all the people in the team some level of independence, and the management theory behind is this empowerment. So that decisions about particular decisions should be made at the level or at the level where the people really deal with that problem. For example, again, taking the one example of Erin, where to put a microwave oven. I will certainly not make this decision. I will let that person to decide about the place for the microwave oven, who will work with that bloody oven, because he or she will know which is the best place for that oven. So again, decisions should be done at the level where people really know what they are talking about or what they are deciding. And again, ideally, it's always good to have some level of freedom to do some research. But I know this is a difficult thing, but it will not always work. And the last thing which I just wanted to mention, What are the mistakes? I think one thing is what I experienced at the ETH, that if you have a mixture of scientific fields, like in the scope M, it's physics and life sciences and earth sciences and electrical engineering and so on and so on. It makes the communication inside of the facility relatively difficult because the people talk totally different languages and have very different needs. And the other one has to do again with the personalities, that if you have two, but again, this is rather for bigger teams, having too many alpha males or females in the team can be dangerous. And again, I don't want to be, I mean, not a racist or anything like that, but it's really like that according my experience, very good software developers, which I was lucky to work with some of them, they tend to be quite often kind of alpha males. And when I had once 2 very good software engineers in my team, it was like the hell. I mean, they were at the end not talking to each other, and both of them thought that he should be the boss and the other one should do the routine task for him and so on. So it was like a very difficult situation to manage. Okay, with this one, sorry, I was a little bit overdrawing, but hopefully it was not fully boring to you. And yeah, thank you, and I am happy to answer questions if there are any.